A specific biological betrayal occurs when ancestral blood overrides the survival instinct, leading to a total tactical surrender in the presence of a hostile force. This midnight encounter begins with a stark environmental contrast. Outside, a freezing winter street. Inside, a warm shop where a neomage stands in a state of complete unreadiness. The anomaly enters through the door as a sudden, dense scent profile. The air fills with heavy notes of caramel, vanilla, and brown sugar, underscored by the sharp, peppery hint of ginger. This diagram maps the biological function of that specific aroma. These scents act as ancestral markers, tracing a path that bypasses the frontal lobe's logic centers to strike directly at the brain's primitive instinct centers. For a neomage, these pheromonal markers represent the initial, unavoidable vector of a total tactical compromise. The physical reaction to this olfactory trigger begins with a reflexive, contradictory muscular defense, as the body instinctively clenches against an unknown presence. This timeline maps the subsequent failure. That initial spike in defensive tension is followed by an immediate crash to zero motor control, as combat readiness evaporates and the body goes entirely limp. While a blast of icy winter air hits bath-wet skin on the outside, the scent triggers a dangerous, escalating internal heat that dismantles the subject's resolve. Physical defenses, like a crisp blade held by the tension of a tight sleeve, become useless as the resulting vasodilation and muscle laxity remove the motor control required to use them. This biphasic collapse constitutes an involuntary physiological surrender, leaving the neomage entirely exposed before their brain can even process the nature of the threat. The light reveals a metal badge partially hidden in the folds of a heavy winter coat, confirming the external threat is a law enforcement officer. Identifying a police officer induces immediate panic, creating a state of cognitive dissonance as the biological sedation continues to paralyze the mage's body. A critical environmental oversight compounds the danger. The subject's protective magical amulets remain in the bathtub, far from reach. The unshielded system on the right illustrates the result. Without the attribute-damping properties of those amulets, the subject has no artificial barrier capable of mitigating the incoming hormonal surge. The neomage briefly calculates that a lone human officer would typically avoid engaging a mage without specialized backup. However, the continuous pheromonal exposure suppresses this rational pause, overriding the fight-or-flight response with a heavy, intoxicating haze. These environmental failures remove all remaining friction against the biological override, turning a standard encounter into an inescapable trap. The officer possesses glacial green-blue eyes, shaggy red hair, and the red-gold shadow of a square jaw. These phenotypic markers, combined with the scent profile, identify the subject as a kylen, a hybrid classification biologically engineered to attract and call to mages. This genetic lineage tree traces the officer's status as a third or fourth generation descendant of the seraph brachial. This ancestral connection dictates a rigid genetic imperative, confirming that the attraction is a product of hard-coded biology rather than emotional preference. The resulting somatic symptoms manifest as a visceral grounding force. The neomage experiences a sensation of transferring heat and a potent, ancient craving for the stranger's touch. This physical sensation of heat and stored power is strong enough to completely override the rational fear of arrest. This kylen neomage attraction functions as a genetic mandate, which cannot be willed away through tactical training or psychological discipline. As the biology takes over, the perception of time loses its fluidity, slowing into a sluggish, honey-thick construct. This temporal distortion is driven by a massive flood of endorphins and hormones that actively mutes the acute threat response. This matrix illustrates the overarching tactical reality of the encounter, a scenario of mutual blind spots known as the double blind. In the first blind spot, the officer, Thaddeus, believes he is a standard human, entirely unaware of his own kylen breeding. In the second blind spot, Thaddeus remains unaware that the shopkeeper he is questioning is a highly dangerous neomage. To manage this, the neomage executes a tactical retreat, dropping the overt short sword while relying on a concealed crisp blade to appear harmless. Even during a mundane conversation, the subject must exert constant physical effort to maintain balance and resist the gravitational pull of the kylen. This mutual ignorance creates an unquantifiable tactical tension, where neither party understands the true hazard occupying the space between them. A close analysis of the officer's badge identifies him as a detective with the Carolina State Law Enforcement. This organizational chart shows a critical divide between standard civilian law enforcement, known as a hand of the law, and the specialized arcane regulatory units of the Arch-Seraph investigator. Because Thaddeus belongs to a standard civilian branch, he lacks the training required to recognize arcane laws or the specific behavioral markers of a neomage. This jurisdictional silo creates a temporary margin of safety, as the officer's ignorance of the arcane prevents him from identifying the mage during their total physiological collapse. The encounter concludes with a complete mental capitulation, as the neomage considers inviting the officer inside. The overwhelming biological pull successfully intertwines with thoughts of safety and comfort, completely overriding all remaining security protocols. These events prove the legendary attraction between mages and kylen is an inescapable biological fact. When your own biology becomes a tactical liability, traditional combat skill is rendered useless. Subscribe to Plot Hazards for more breakdowns of the dangers of the arcane. In the end, true survival depends entirely on the ability to resist the mandates of your own blood.